Hi, my name is John Madsen, owner of John Madsen Performance in Salt Lake City, Utah. Formerly, I played football for the University of Utah football team as a wide receiver and in the National Football League as a tight end for the Oakland Raiders. For the past 6 years, I've trained hundreds of athletes looking to increase their athletic ability. I've trained athletes starting at the middle school ranks, going all the way up to multiple NFL athletes, Major League Baseball athletes, and other professional athletes. Today I wanted to bring you guys a video that's going to teach you the ins and outs of how to master the combine test. In the last 6 years, I've coached multiple athletes needing to train for NFL combine tests where they needed to perform their very best in order to realize their dream of making it to the National Football League. Tenths of seconds, hundreds of seconds, inches on vertical jumps, are all extremely important to these guys if they are to realize their dream of playing in the NFL. With the increase in popularity of the NFL Combine, there's been an increase in popularity for high school combines around the nation. I trained a lot of high school athletes who have needed to prepare to perform their best on a single day in the tests such as the 40-yard dash, the vertical jump, the broad jump, the 20-yard shuttle, and the 3-cone drill or L drill. In this training video, you're going to see the tips and techniques that are needed to master each and every one of these tests so that when you are asked to perform these tests at whatever combine you're going to be invited to, you're going to be able to do so to the maximum of your ability. This is not a video that's going to teach you how to train for these combines or teach you how to increase your speed, teach you how to increase your vertical jump, teach you how to increase your explosiveness. Those training videos and those programs you can find at johnmadsenperformance.com. We have online programming so that you can fully maximize each and every one of your capabilities. But this training video is going to serve one purpose. It's going to teach you in a matter of minutes how to master each one of the drills. The 40-yard dash is the most important and most popular of all the combine tests. Each tenth of a second is of the utmost importance to each athlete. High school athletes wanting to receive that college scholarship with a bad test score may never realize that scholarship offer. NFL hopefuls, if they have a bad test day, they may not ever realize that NFL dream. Most of our improvement is going to come in the first 10 yards of this test. Our stance, our start, and the number of steps we take in that first 10 yards is going to determine whether we're going to have a good test score or a bad test score. Primarily, we want each athlete to take between 5 and 7 steps when they reach that 10-yard mark. Some athletes may look really fast when they're running, but if they're taking 8 to 10 steps, every single time we're going to look at their score at the end of the race and they're going to have a bad score. So in this video, we're going to show you how to perfect your stance, we're going to show you how to perfect your start, and we're going to show you how to eliminate unnecessary steps so that when you reach the end of the 40-yard dash, you're going to be very happy with your time. Every inch matters when we're talking about our 40-yard dash start. For the right-handed athlete, I want to get up to the line. With my left foot, I want to go 4 to 6 inches back, no farther, no closer. Okay? We don't want to be too far back. We don't want to be hugging the line too close. That makes us uncomfortable. So 4 to 6 inches is a good reference point. From there, I'm going to take my right foot. I'm going to measure from the back of my heel. I'm going to get a shoulder width distance apart. And now I'm going to lean forward a yard over the line. I want to be a yard over the line because I want to make this 40-yard dash as short as possible. Okay? So from this position, I don't want to reach back and lose all of my forward lean with a straight arm. What I want to do is inch back as slow as I can so that I keep a forward lean with my head as far out over the line as possible. I'm not going to be able to hold this stance for a long time. It's really uncomfortable, but I'm going to get in a position where I can hold it for a second and a half. From that position right here, the next most important thing to think about is what to do with your offhand. I see a lot of kids at these combines with their hand clear up there. All of that is doing is creating a signal for the person at the end of the test who's putting a stopwatch on your first movement. Instead of keeping that hand up there where they can see it,
I want to tuck it into my pocket almost, right off to the side, so that they can't see anything that's going to distract them before your first movement. Get in this stance here. This is where that offhand's going to go. Lastly, with our stance in place, an extremely, extremely important point of this whole stance is the ability to explode out of the stance with the biggest step possible. I'm going to be here in my stance, left arm tucked, and from here I'm going to swing my right arm back violently and take the biggest step possible.
Like I said at the beginning of this demonstration, the least amount of steps possible through this first 10 yards is the most important thing we can teach. Stride length is hugely important on this 40-yard dash. So the very first step then, like you just saw me take, is at least a yard in front of that line, okay? Most of the times when I see these high school combines, I see athletes who have no idea how to start, and then they take tons of steps throughout that first 10 yards. It looks something like this.
First of all, they get in a football stance instead of a 40 stance, and their eyes and head are up, okay? In addition to that, their arms usually up here, and then their first step is barely over the line, okay? The way I'm teaching you to do this, we're already a yard ahead of most kids, giving us tenths of a second advantage. To demonstrate the 40-yard dash in its entirety, I'm going to bring in Tangeray Towns, former wide receiver at the University of Utah. First thing first, like I mentioned earlier, Tango is going to take a 4 to 6 inch stance behind the line with his left foot because he's a right-handed athlete. If you're a left-handed athlete, you do opposite of what I'm saying. From there, he's going to take his right foot to the back of his left foot and then measure shoulder width distance apart, and that's where his feet are going to be planted for this 40-yard start. Go ahead. From there, Tango is going to reach out a yard in front of the line, and he's going to inch himself back pretty slowly so he can keep that really important forward lean. One other thing I failed to mention in my demonstration that Tango does a great job of is his hips are above his shoulders. Okay, what we don't want to see is hips even with the shoulders or hips below the shoulders. We want those hips to be high, and we want this forward lean in this arm. From there, Tango's not going to look up. He's going to keep his head down. And like I said before, the least amount of steps win this test. He's going to keep his head down for the entirety of the 10 yards. The 20-yard shuttle is a test designed to test each athlete's ability to change directions. Other names for the 20-yard shuttle might be the 5-10-5 or the Pro Agility. If you hear someone refer to these tests as any of the three, they're simply referring to the 20-yard shuttle. First of all, just like the 40-yard dash, we're going to teach you how to do this test in the least amount of steps possible. A common theme in all of these combine tests is an athlete's ability to finish each test with the least amount of steps possible is the athlete who's going to perform better than the rest. We're going to break the 20-yard shuttle down into 3 distinct parts. The first part of this is just going to be the first 5 yards, and I'm going to teach all of you athletes how to get it done in 4 steps, no more than 4 steps. For the stance, you're going to be asked to straddle the line, and your right hand or left hand, usually it's going to be your choice, is going to dictate which way you're going to go first. For the purpose of this drill, we're going to start to our right. My stance is going to be straddling the line. A lot of my weight is going to be on my left foot because I'm going right first. I'm going to put my right hand down, not into a 3-point stance leaning forward, but all my weight shifted to the right with my one finger dangling on the line. We have to hold this position for 2 seconds before you start the drill. What I don't want is to have my head up like this before you start this drill. We want it to be down looking at the line. From this position here, I'm going to take 4 steps. I'm going to keep my shoulders square, and I'm going to stay as low as possible to the ground. 4 crossover steps. I'm going to start down here, head down, and I'm going to stay as low as possible to the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4. Swipe with your right hand. A lot of times when I go to combines for high school kids and even college athletes, the first thing they want to do is turn and run, and they take a lot of unnecessary choppy steps. It looks something like this.
One other advantage we may get away with, depending on the conductor of this test, we may be able to stagger our feet slightly with the left foot slightly above the right foot. If Tango puts his right foot back, he gets a clear-cut step without having to deviate from a straight line. Some conductors of this test, however, make you have your feet completely square. So I always tell my athletes, start with a staggered stance unless they tell you you have to make it square. From here, Tango's going to get down into a stance with a slightly staggered foot. From here, he's going to demonstrate the first 4 yards of this 20-yard shuttle.
The next portion of this test is the next 10 yards to the pro agility drill. You're going to swipe with your right hand, you're going to sprint 10 yards as fast as you can, and you have to touch that line with your left hand facing the same direction. We're going to start this portion right here in this crouched position as if we swiped the line from the first portion of this taught demonstration. From this position to the next 10 yards, it's extremely important that we're only going to take 6 steps to get 10 yards. It is impossible to get there if we take short, choppy steps out of this change of direction from this position right here. I'm going to swipe the line and take 6 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's always going to take me 10 yards. And then I'm going to swipe with my left hand, which is going to lead us to the next portion to finish out this 20-yard shuttle. The final portion of the 20-yard shuttle is going to start with a left-hand swipe, and we're going to take us through the next 5 yards. The next 5 yards we're going to treat as if it's a 40-yard dash, keeping our head down, and we're going to get there in 3 steps, no more than 3 steps. Here's the position we ended the last portion in. I'm going to swipe with my left hand, put my head down, and finish through the 5 yards as if it's a 40-yard dash. I'm going to swipe, 1, 2, 3, and the test is over. That concludes the test. As a review, okay, the most important thing you can get out of this training video, once again, is the person who takes the least amount of steps is going to perform better on this drill. 13 total steps to finish this 20-yard shuttle. The 3-cone drill, often referred to as the L drill, is another test which tests athletes' ability to change direction. One of the biggest keys to doing this test starts right here at the beginning line with the start. In every test we've demonstrated so far, we've done out of a right-handed stance, and it doesn't matter either way whether it's a left-handed stance or a right-handed stance. With the 3-cone drill, it's imperative that every athlete starts in a left-handed stance, and the reason is we're going to take less steps in doing so, and I'm about to demonstrate why. If I were to start in my normal right-handed stance, it would take me 5 steps to get 5 yards and 3 steps getting back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. If I were to change my right-handed stance into a left-handed stance, everything's going to be similar to a right-handed stance, with the exception my feet and my left hand is going to be down. From here, you're going to see that I take 1 less step in this first portion.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Right after the ending point of the first portion, we're going to have to touch this line with our right hand in the same fashion as the 20-yard shuttle. Instead of reaching and touching, I want to swipe so that our momentum can take us forward. From this point right here, we're going to have to complete the L drill in a figure 8 fashion. From this position here, the next most important teaching point to this drill is going to take us to that first cone. We have to get there and plant off our left foot in 4 steps. I'm going to swipe with my right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. This foot right here, this left foot, is going to go 6 to 8 inches above this first cone, and we want to plant off that left foot. From there, we're going to swing our right foot around, and we saved ourselves a couple steps. A lot of times when I see people run this drill, they run it like they're running a route. They run up to the cone, they plant with our left foot, and they try to make a direct L cut or 90-degree cut, which is really hard for a lot of athletes to do. I want us to take an angle into this first cone, plant off our left foot, and save us a few steps. You see this plant step right here. That's going to allow me to whip my right foot around and take me into the final portion of this drill. This right foot comes right around this cone, and we're going to build a tiny bit of depth going to that third cone right there. One of the teaching points around this first cone is there's a happy medium of how much depth we're going to get when we perform this figure 8. We don't want to get too much depth that takes our deviation off the perfect path and adds time onto this test. After I make this cut with my left foot, we're going to go right down this line. At the very end, I'm going to bow out a tiny bit, and I'm going to plant once again off my right foot 6 to 8 inches beyond this cone, right on this line. Our shoulder's going to be facing a more diagonal direction, and this left foot is going to swing around the cone, and it's going to enable me to take the perfect path to finish this drill, which is back to the starting line, and we do not want to gain any width when we cut this cone right here. Little bit of depth, vertical, all the way through. One more time before I bring in someone to demonstrate this drill in its entirety, I'm just going to jog through the whole thing without any teaching points. The vertical jump is a combine test that measures how much explosiveness an athlete has, how much power he can create. Ironically, if you look at all the test data from the NFL combines of the past, there's a huge correlation to the people who jump the highest and run the fastest 40-yard time. The reason is, in order to jump high, you must be an explosive athlete, much in the same way if you're to run a fast 40 time, you have to be an explosive athlete. This portion explaining how to best perform the vertical jump is not intended to increase your explosive capabilities. Its intention is to simply let you maximize your current abilities so that you may perform the best you can possibly perform when you're asked to perform this test. One of the first things to consider when we're talking about a vertical jump is what surface or what equipment is being used to determine the test outcome. One of the most popular pieces of equipment is called a Vertec machine. I don't have one right here, but it's one of the machines where you've seen it a million times. You see an athlete jump up and they swipe little pins that are hanging, and then the test operator is going to take the measurement to see which pin you hit at the highest possible height. Another piece of equipment that's commonly used, especially for the high school athlete, is a jump vertical pad, where an athlete is asked to step up onto the pad and simply jump as high as he's capable of. In that test, the pad will electronically give you the test result and tell you how high your vertical jump is. Irregardless of which way you're being tested in the vertical jump, one of the most important things to consider is tight hip flexors. We spend an enormous amount of time in our daily lives, especially student athletes, sitting down, which causes our hip flexors to become extremely tight. With tight hip flexors, there's going to be a lot of tension, which is going to make you unable to reach to your highest potential. If I want to stretch this hip flexor, I want a 90-degree angle right here with my shin and then this portion of my leg, and I want to be as tall as possible. From there, I'm going to squeeze this glute muscle as hard as I can for at least 60 seconds. As you're squeezing this glute muscle, if your hip flexors are tight, you're going to feel an opening sensation where you feel like the hip flexor is opening up. When you do that for a couple seconds, as you feel the tension ease away, then you can simply push your hips into the stretch a little bit, and you're going to feel an even more extreme stretch. From that position right there, you can take the arm of the leg that's down on the ground and reach it above your head, still squeezing your right glute muscle, and reach as high as you can and simply turn a little bit in to the knee that's up. From that position, you're going to hold it for another 20 to 30 seconds, and you're going to feel an extreme opening of hip flexor. You're going to perform this stretch for at least 1 minute on both sides before you perform your vertical test jump. If you do nothing else, 95% of people with tight hip flexors will feel their hip flexor open up just from this motion right here, flexing that glute as hard as possible. Again, these hip flexor stretches are to be done when you're waiting in line, waiting for your turn to jump, and you're going to do them for 1 minute to 2 minutes until you're completely stretched out. The next most important part to performing the vertical jump to the best of our ability is taking a good stance. A lot of times you're going to see athletes with too wide of a base. That's not a good foundation to perform a maximal jump, or they're going to be too narrow. Our stance should be shoulder width, which is a little bit less than what most people think. Our feet are right underneath our shoulders, and our toes are pointing straight ahead. From there, regardless if we're jumping with a Vertec device or a vertical jump pad, we want to reach up as high as we can. Okay, we want to fully stretch out, and like a spring, we're going to descend as fast as we can, swinging my arms down before we jump as high as we can. I'm going to start right like this with my arms high above my head, and in one swift movement, I'm going to swing my arms down, arms behind, and then you're going to jump vertically. We don't want to deviate at all, forward or backward. We have to jump straight up. Think of your body like a spring. We're going to stretch it out, descend really, really quickly, and all in one motion explode to the highest of your ability. I'm going to have Tangeray come back into this picture, and he's going to perform a vertical jump. First thing first, you're going to see Tango with a good shoulder width stance. He's going to be tall. All of this is done after he's already performed the hip flexor stretches. Now he's going to reach up as high as he can, and I'm going to let him take a jump so that you can see it in full motion. Now there's a little variation from the next portion of what I teach in the case that it's a Vertec where you're asked to reach up before you take the jump, in which case the person conducting the test is going to measure the distance of you reaching up as high as you can. I'm going to act like we're going to perform the vertical jump using a Vertec machine with Tangeray as our demonstrator. He's going to face this way. I want you to be able to see him in a side view. He's going to reach up with his right hand, okay, just one hand usually. He's going to reach up as high as he can. Now, what we want to do is lock our shoulder blade down, okay? Because how they're gonna come up with the measurement of exactly how high our vertical is they're gonna subtract the highest link we can touch to this height right here. What we don't wanna do is reach up with all of our might to get every last centimeter of height for this portion, okay? What we wanna do is make it seem like we're reaching as high as we can. Our bicep is right on our ear. There's no bend in our elbow. He's reaching up, and the conductor of the test is gonna pull his arm up. What Tango wants to do is lock this shoulder down and make me unable to lift his arm up anymore. From that distance right there, that's what we want, instead of him releasing that shoulder blade and making him increase his standing height, which would ultimately lead to a decrease in vertical jump performance. One of the most important things we can do is stand directly underneath where we're gonna reach up and touch, because we don't wanna jump forward because we're losing inches. So that would be the only difference depending on which device you're gonna get tested with, depending on the combines you're going to. The broad jump is another combine test that is used to measure an athlete's explosive capabilities. Much like the vertical jump, we're going to attack the broad jump exactly like the vertical jump video you just saw. One of the most important things we can do is stretch our hip flexors out before we perform this test. Much like the vertical jump also is a correlation to a far broad jump to a faster 40 time. Again, very similar to the video you just saw with the vertical jump, another important factor is how our stance is at the start of this test. We do not want to have a wide stance. We do not want to have a narrow stance. Our stance is shoulder width apart, and we're going to take as much starting line as we possibly can. A big mistake I see, and a real common occurrence amongst high school kids, is they get up to the line and there's 2 to 3 more inches of space, and they're already at a 2 to 3 inch disadvantage. Remember, every inch, every second is important in all of these tests. So we want to take as much space as we're given by the conductor of these tests. So we want a shoulder width stance, we want to take as much of the line as possible, and just like the vertical jump, our first movement is going to be to reach our arms up as high as we can and descend them as fast as we can. Now the difference with a broad jump is we're not getting tested on the height of the jump, we're getting tested simply on the distance. But everything else is the same. We're going to reach up, we're going to swing back violently, and then every ounce of our force is going to be used to use our momentum to take us to the farthest distance in one jump. We're going to bring Tanqueray in here to demonstrate the broad jump. The bench press test has been a mainstay at the NFL Combine, with their athletes training at 225 pounds regardless of position. For the high school combines, most of them around the nation now, if they include the bench press at all, they're going to do so at 185 pounds. There's a lot of things we can do instantly to increase our chances of putting up a personal record on this test. However, if you want to perform this test to the best of your ability, you're going to have to train 2 components. Maximal strength is the most amount of weight that you can possibly bench press. A good example of that is for a person that can bench press 315 pounds has a much better chance of pressing 225 for more reps than another person who can only bench 250 pounds. So one of the most important ways we can increase the number of reps on a combine bench press test is actually increasing the maximum amount of weight we can press. Strength endurance is a whole other priority that we prioritize in our strength programs so that our athletes are able to maximize their performance on the bench press test. But quickly, for the purpose of this training video, I want to make sure each one of you athletes understand the correct way to bench press, the correct way to set up for this test, and a few simple techniques and tips that will help you immensely. I'm going to bring in Tanqueray to sit down on this bench, and we're going to show you how to set up for this test correctly. The setup for the bench press test is very, very important. Most athletes simply lie down on the bench with no tension created in their body and lay down to bench press this test, okay? That's the last thing we want to do. With Tanqueray right here on this bench press, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to bring his feet underneath his hips. From that position there, Tanqueray's also going to reach up to the bar. He's going to grab hold of the bar. We're going to go a little bit wider. We want to train ourselves a little bit wider for the purpose of this drill, because if we're wider on the bench press, not way wide, just slightly wider, our distance to the top is going to be shorter than if we're closer grip. So we're going to inch out just a little bit. He's going to reach up to the bar, and then the next most important thing is to lift his chest as high as he can and pinch his shoulder blades back. Okay, his feet are underneath his hips. He's creating maximum tension throughout his body. His chest is high. His hands are a little bit wider than normal. He's creating maximum tension, squeezing his quads, squeezing his glutes. His core is tight. And in addition to that, you're going to see that there's room underneath his lower back. So his butt's on the ground, his shoulder blades are on the bench, and then there's space in between that bench press because his chest is raised off that bench. From that position there, you're going to be the strongest possible position for you to maximize your performance on this test. Too many times we see athletes rushed into the bench press portion of the combine test, and they're not properly warmed up. They're not ready to bench press the maximum amount of repetitions that they possibly can. We want to start the warm-up with 15 reps of just the bar. No added weight. I don't care if you're an NFL athlete that can bench press 365 pounds or 400 pounds. They all start with a bar and press it up 15 times, and they're going to do so in a fashion that in their mind they're bench pressing the maximum amount of weight. So even though the bar is really light for all of you watching this video and some of the strongest athletes I've ever trained, they attack the warm-up as if it's the test portion of their bench press test. So after the bar, 15 reps, each one of the athletes is then going to put on 25s, which is 95 pounds. They're going to perform that 10 times, 10 to 12 times, depending on how they feel. That's a really good starting point. From there, if they're a really strong athlete, they would jump to 185 pounds, perform 185 3 to 5 times. From that, they're going to jump to 225, which would be the NFL athlete's test weight. They would perform that one time just to get a feel of the weight. And in addition to all these warm-up sets, they're going to take 2 to 3 minutes rest as the weight increases. Okay, so after that 225, a strong athlete who can bench well over 300 pounds, they're actually going to bench 275 and hit 275 for a rep. And the reason is they're going to shock their nervous system so that when they drop back down to 225 pounds, the weight feels lighter. For you high school athletes who are watching this film, you have to understand where your strength is. Regardless of how strong you are, you're going to start with just the bar, 45 pounds, and again, bench it 15 times with purpose, not just laying flat on the bench and going through the motions. You're going to lift with purpose regardless of how much weight's on the bar. From there, you're going to put 95 pounds on the bar. You're going to perform 10 to 12 reps. After that, you're going to jump to 135, and you're going to perform 5 reps. From there, you have to understand where you're at in your strength capabilities right now. An athlete who is going to get, maybe a couple reps to 8 reps, they're going to do one more warm-up set of 165 pounds and rep out that 2 times. And then they're going to save their max effort for that 185-pound test. Now, if you're an athlete that's a lot stronger than 185 and your max is somewhere near 225 or 275 pounds, after a 135-pound warm-up, you're going to jump to 185, you're going to hit it 2 to 3 reps, and then you're going to jump again if you're strong enough. If you can bench 275 pounds or more, you're going to take one more jump and bench 225, 1 to 2 reps, which in the same fashion as the NFL athletes is going to shock your nervous system and enable you to have the weight, 185 pounds, feel a lot lighter than it normally would if you were to just jump right into it. I know that's a lot of information, but the warm-up is imperative for you to perform your best. You have to understand how strong you are and what your maximum capability is so that you can get your warm-up exactly what it needs to be in order for you to perform your best. Now, the other important factor in all of that is how much rest time you're getting. Okay, we don't want to rush through all these sets. We want to take 2 to 3 minutes in between each warm-up set, and then if we jump up above our weight and hit that last set of 225, before we drop back down and perform our test, we want at least 3 to 4 minutes rest, preferably in the 4 to 5 range, so that we're properly recovered to perform that test to the best of our abilities. The last thing I'm going to mention when talking about a bench press test, in addition to the setup, in addition to the warm-up, is how we breathe, okay? Too many athletes are taking breaths in the wrong fashion, which is inhibiting them from performing their very best. So again, it depends how strong you are. If you're an athlete who is going to put up the test number, 185 pounds, 15 to 20 times, we're going to take that bar off the rack and you're going to bench it as many times as possible in one breath, okay? You're going to reach a point, though, that the weight feels heavy and we have to stop at the top to catch our breath. We're going to take a couple breaths and then we're going to continue with reps of 2 to 3 until the weight feels really heavy, and at a certain point we're going to have to take a deep breath in, do a rep, pause at the top for a split second, deep breath in, do a rep, and you're going to, what we call that, grinding out the last amount of reps. Now, it's really hard to explain without a demonstration, but a demonstration is going to do you guys no good because it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to be different depending on how strong they are. If you're an athlete that can only bench press 185